So hi, I'm Talia. At our anniversary party, I saw my sister and husband share a glance, then slip something into my wine, like I'd never notice. I smiled, switched glasses, watched her drink it. 10 minutes later, she excused herself, face flushed, eyes unfocused. They thought I was naive, but they had no idea I already knew about the emails, the bank transfers, the plan to erase me, quietly, completely. You ever realize the people you trust most are rehearsing your downfall, right beside you at dinner? Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop a comment below. This one gets dark. The clink of silver on china echoed across the long mahogany table. Soft jazz floated in the background, too polite to disrupt, yet too smooth to be real. That's how the whole evening felt. Curated. The lighting was warm, the napkins were folded into roses, and my name was barely spelled right on the place card. Talia with an I, right? Valora had asked, smirking, when the cards were printed. Always has been, I said quietly, knowing she knew. The celebration was for our 10th wedding anniversary, mine and Declan's, but the event felt like Valora's baby shower, office party, and campaign rally all rolled into one. She co-hosted. Her words. I paid for most of it. She picked the flowers. I made the slideshow. She approved the playlist. Declan? He just nodded, charmed and distant, playing the attentive husband to a room that didn't know better. I'd spent the day smoothing out wrinkles, both in the linens and the guest list. My parents arrived early and asked if Valora had picked the wine. I said yes. They smiled. By the time dessert was cleared and Declan tapped his glass with a spoon, I was ready to go home. Everyone, he began, standing tall, arm wrapped around Valora's shoulder like they were the ones celebrating. Thank you for joining us tonight. I looked up. He wasn't looking at me. His hand slid off Valora's shoulder, then rested on her lower back. She's been my guiding light, he continued. Through long nights, impossible deadlines, and every high and low, Talia's been the reason this marriage works. That was the first time he said my name. Valora turned to me, lifting her glass. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Here's to 10 years of loyalty, she said, with a little tilt of her head that made me feel like she knew a secret I didn't. I smiled back, thin, practiced. My glass, still untouched, sat just to my right. Declan reached over casually, switching it with the one in front of him. Yours looked warmer, he said, eyes twinkling. Valora chuckled, brushing her hand through her hair. He's always so thoughtful. There it was, that tiny glitch. A flicker in her gaze, a sideways glance too quick to be kind. And suddenly, I knew. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Earlier, I'd noticed Valora whisper something to Declan when she came back from the kitchen. I'd also seen her hover over the bar when she thought no one was watching. And now Declan was offering me a glass, his glass, with a wine she hadn't poured herself. They thought I wouldn't notice. But I did, and I didn't flinch. I nodded, reached slowly for the glass he'd placed near me, then, with a smooth motion, swapped it again when their attention drifted to a joke someone at the far end of the table made. My new glass was untouched and safe. Hers now had whatever they meant for me. 10 minutes later, Valora excused herself. Her movements were too careful. Her smile cracked under pressure. I'll be right back, she said. Her voice had a strange pitch, like it was borrowed. I watched her walk toward the hallway, unsteady but trying to hide it. One hand clutched her designer clutch like it was glued to her palm. Our mother asked Declan if she was okay. He just said, "Probably too much champagne." I said nothing. I looked at the glass in front of me, the one she'd tried to steer toward my lips. I turned it slightly, as if checking the rim. There was no need to inspect further. I already knew. You don't grow up as the invisible daughter and not learn to recognize manipulation, especially when it's dressed in silk and sprayed with perfume. I stood just long enough to watch Valora disappear past the heavy banquet doors. Her heels faltered slightly on the marble, but she kept her posture like a pageant queen trained never to fall. Just glide. I waited a few moments, pretended to dab my mouth with the napkin, then quietly excused myself from the table. No one noticed. They rarely did. The hallway behind the banquet hall was dimmer than I expected. Gold wall sconces cast a soft light over the patterned wallpaper, the scent of eucalyptus and lemon polish clinging faintly to the air. Velvet drapes at the end swayed slightly from the draft slipping through the exit door. I didn't come here to check on her. I came to confirm something I'd carried in my gut for weeks, a suspicion I'd tucked away under busyness and good manners. But it had a pulse now. As I rounded the corner near the coat room, voices drifted through the fabric partition behind a column. Low, fast, urgent. "She didn't drink it," Valora hissed. "I watched her. She switched it." There was a pause. Then Declan's voice, tighter than usual, followed. "You said you'd handle this. We can't wait another year, Valora. It has to be now." Every nerve in my body went still. Not tense, just aware. Like my skin had opened tiny doors to the air, listening with more intent than my ears ever could. I took 2 steps back into the shadows, leaning just enough behind the curve of a decorative plant. "You think I don't know that?" Valora snapped, her breath coming faster. "She's not stupid. I told you this wouldn't be clean." My phone buzzed lightly in my clutch. I slipped it open without looking. A message preview flashed. "Got the file. You were right. Will call in 10. Aaron." Aaron, my old college roommate, now a PI in Austin. I'd reached out 6 weeks ago when I found something strange on our shared iCloud account. 2 months earlier, I was logging into our shared streaming service, looking for a documentary to distract me from our fading marriage, when I saw an email saved in Declan's drafts. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't even about me. It was coded, vague. But the sender? Valora's business email. And the subject line? Phase 2. I remembered the cold that settled into my chest that night, the way I stared at the screen, rereading the line like it might change, like it might mean anything but what it obviously did. Valora introduced me to Declan. She pushed me toward him. "He's perfect for you," she had gushed one Christmas, long before I knew better. "Stable, ambitious, just what you need." And I, always the accommodating little sister, had smiled and trusted. That's what I'd been taught to do. Now I stood feet away from them, hearing what that trust had cost me. Declan sighed. "This is getting messy. You said she wouldn't catch on." Valora's heels clicked softly as she shifted weight. "We'll pivot. We still have the assets locked under my name." That's not what we agreed. Their words blurred together after that. Not because I couldn't hear, but because I no longer needed to. I had enough. The wine, the whispers, the draft email. It all connected now. Not paranoia, not insecurity. Truth. I stepped forward, quiet but steady. My heels made just enough sound to alert them. They straightened like children caught with chocolate-stained hands. "Valora," I said smoothly. "You don't look well. Would you like to go home?" She blinked. Declan flinched. They didn't know what I'd heard, and that was my edge. She opened her mouth to say something, maybe a lie, maybe a deflection, but closed it again. Her hands fidgeted with her clutch. That designer thing she never let go of, like it carried all her secrets. "I'm fine," she finally said. "Just heat stroke. These fall nights are weird." I nodded, voice syrup smooth. "They are. Funny how they creep up." Declan forced a chuckle, but it cracked halfway through. "Maybe we should wrap up soon." "I think that's a good idea." I smiled at both of them, long and steady. No need to overdo it. Behind me, the hallway stretched back to the banquet doors. Music floated in again, something jazzy, too cheery. I didn't move yet. I gave them just enough silence to wonder how much I'd heard, how much I knew. I felt their discomfort growing in the space between us. Declan didn't say a word. His mouth had opened slightly, just enough for me to see panic ripple beneath the surface. That silence told me more than any apology ever could. I let it sit there, 3 long seconds of eye contact, before I turned away and walked back to the banquet hall. The music was too upbeat for what I was carrying inside. People were laughing, clinking glasses, posing for pictures near the floral arch I had designed. I forced one last, tight smile to Valora's husband and thanked the caterer on my way out. By the time I pulled into our driveway in Portland, just after midnight, the drizzle had turned steady. The streetlights cast a soft orange glow across the hedges lining the walk, and the scent of wet pine filled the air. I parked in the far corner near the rose bushes, not wanting my headlights to wake the neighbors. Inside, the house was quiet. Declan hadn't come home yet. I didn't expect him to. I slipped off my heels and walked straight into the office at the back of the house. No lights, just the blue ambient glow of the standby computer monitor and the rhythmic tapping of rain against the skylight. The shadows in the room felt heavier than usual, maybe because they knew too. I sat down, opened the locked drawer beneath my desk, and retrieved the bracelet I had worn that night. Plain silver, a holiday gift from myself, though Declan thought Valora picked it out. The truth was simpler and sadder. Erin had sent it. She'd installed a tiny embedded lens inside after I told her my gut said something was wrong. That was 5 months ago. I'd never had to use it until now. I plugged it into my laptop. The files loaded quickly. There it was. The clink of glass. Declan leaning forward. A glint. A pause. The brief flick of his eyes toward Valora. Then the hallway recording. Valora's voice. She didn't drink it. I watched her. She switched it. Declan. You said you'd handle this. We can't wait another year. My breath didn't hitch. My eyes didn't well up. I sat motionless, staring at my own life from the outside, pixel by pixel. I paused the video, rewound, played it again. Then I opened a new document and began transcribing. Word for word. It took less than 30 minutes. When I finished, I printed it out and slipped the pages into a navy blue folder. In thick marker, I wrote one word on the cover. Confirmation. I leaned back in my chair and turned toward the bookshelf. Behind the middle row, tucked behind tax folders and client sketches, sat a small fireproof safe. I keyed in the code. Inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it. On top, a prenuptial agreement I had signed 10 years ago. Reluctantly. Declan insisted. Valora reviewed it. Her lawyer drafted it. I hadn't questioned it then. Below it, the torn remains of a post-nuptial agreement we argued over 5 years into the marriage. It was meant to protect my small business. We fought. He yelled. I folded. He tore it in half during an argument and tossed it in the trash. I retrieved it and kept both pieces. That night, I remembered what Valora had told me just before our wedding. Prenups are for women who don't trust their men. Or themselves. You're not one of those women, are you, Talia? It had sounded like sisterly wisdom at the time. Now, it echoed like a warning. I looked at the clock. 5:41 a.m. Still raining, still dark. But I wasn't tired, just hollow. Like everything inside had rearranged itself and was waiting for the new map to arrive. The doorbell rang. That never happened at this hour. I wrapped a sweater around myself and opened the door slowly. A small woman stood there, holding a manila envelope under her arm, wrapped in plastic. She wore a raincoat, hood down, hair pulled back tight like she didn't care about sleep anymore. "Ms. Creer?" she asked gently. "I know it's early, but I'm flying to Tampa today. I had to bring this in person." My stomach tightened. "I used to work for you, 4 years ago," she added, as if explaining her right to speak. "My name's Rosa. I cleaned the guest house. You and your sister—" "I remember you." She handed me the envelope. "I didn't know what I was seeing at the time, but after what happened with your mom's foundation money, I put it together. It's all in there." I nodded slowly, unable to speak. I didn't want to leave without doing the right thing. "I'm sorry I waited." I thanked her. She turned and walked back into the wet gray. I closed the door and returned to my office. The envelope was warm from her hands. Inside, printed emails, time-stamped cleaning logs, a receipt from a wellness retreat I had paid for 6 years ago. When Valora said she needed a break from the family, there was also a blurry photo of 2 people sitting by the pool at that same retreat, Declan and Valora. The photo was dated 3 years before she introduced us. That's when it all fell into place. The retreat, the pressure to date him, the carefully timed moves, the joint account errors, the disappearing assets. It hadn't been chaos. It had been strategy. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up with Aaron's last text. "Ready when you are." I pressed call. A calm voice answered on the second ring. "Talia?" I cleared my throat. "Hi? Yes, I'm ready to proceed. No more delays. I'll bring everything." There was a pause. Then Aaron asked gently, "Talia, are you sure you want to do this?" And I said, "I've never been surer of anything." We ended the call with nothing more than a quiet, "See you in an hour." But the silence after that was louder than any storm. I dressed with slow, deliberate movements, a navy blazer, cream blouse, hair swept back, no perfume, no rings, only my father's watch, scratched at the edges but still ticking steady. I caught my reflection just once, in the hallway mirror before leaving. The woman staring back didn't blink. She didn't need to. The rain hadn't let up. Portland's morning was gray and cold, mist clinging to the windshield as I drove downtown. The streets were still sleepy, but I wasn't. I hadn't closed my eyes all night. Clarity kept me upright. By the time I stepped into the glass building, the receptionist was just flipping on the lobby lights. She greeted me like she knew not to ask too much. I nodded, took the elevator up, and walked down the long carpeted hallway to the corner office Aaron had reserved. The boardroom was sleek, steel frames, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a wet skyline, 3 chairs on one side, 2 on the other, and an empty one at the head of the table, mine. Declan was already there, sipping from a paper coffee cup like this was a routine financial check-in. His suit looked pressed, his hair perfect. 2 lawyers flanked him, one thin and nervy, the other older and trying too hard to appear calm. "Talia," Declan said, like I was interrupting brunch. "We thought this was just to clear up a misunderstanding about those wire transfers." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the briefcase I had placed gently beside me. No dramatic pause, no deep breath. I had prepared for this like one prepares for surgery. First, I laid out the folder labeled Confirmation, then the torn pieces of the postnup, now carefully taped, notarized with a sworn affidavit from Aaron's paralegal, dated and stamped retroactively. Next, a set of printed spreadsheets showing a series of withdrawals from our joint account, each one marked as a gift to a shell company, one that just so happened to be operated under Valora's name until last week. I watched one of the attorneys shift in his seat, and finally, I placed a small digital recorder on the table and pressed play. Valora's voice, she didn't drink it. I watched her. She switched it. "Declan, you said you'd handle this. We can't wait another year." Declan's jaw twitched. I reached into the briefcase again and pulled out the sealed letter from the housekeeper. I didn't read it aloud. I didn't have to. The expression on Declan's face told me he already knew what it said. Aaron leaned forward. "Please confirm your voices on this recording for the record." Declan didn't answer. His lawyer coughed once. "We'd like a moment in private with our client." I didn't blink. "This isn't a negotiation." There was a pause. The kind that doesn't just sit in the air, it expands and presses in on the walls. Then I added coolly, "You might want to review this." I slid another document across the table, a cease and desist complete with legal seal addressed to Valora's LLC. "Effective immediately, all assets under Vela Development Partners are frozen," I said, "and as of 3 days ago, the registration has been refiled under my maiden name, through a proxy partner." Aaron smiled faintly. "We anticipated fraud. Oregon law's very clear about fiduciary abuse between siblings." One of the attorneys looked like he might choke. Declan finally cleared his throat. This isn't public yet, right?" I leaned forward, my voice barely above a whisper. "That depends. On her." I stood. "I suggest you make a copy of that cease and desist. It's your only one. They didn't follow me when I left. I didn't expect them to." The rain had softened to a hush by the time I stepped out of the building, but my pulse still pounded like thunder in my ears. Back across town, somewhere near the river, Valora was pacing. She stood in her high-rise apartment's kitchen, phone pressed tight against her ear, barefoot on the marble floor, cold coffee abandoned on the counter. Her call went to voicemail. Again. "Pick up," she muttered, biting her thumbnail. "You said this wouldn't spiral." She called another number. No answer. Then she opened her laptop, typed something into a secure banking portal, paused, and slammed it shut. Outside her window, the clouds shifted just slightly, but inside, the storm had only begun. She came in like she was late for tea, unapologetic, unreadable, and wearing white from collarbone to heel. Her heels clicked softly against the tile, sharp but measured, like she had practiced the rhythm. I didn't stand. I stayed seated behind my desk, a cup of black coffee cooling beside a stack of files I hadn't touched. The blinds were drawn halfway, letting in just enough morning light to cut across the bookshelves and cast long, slanting shadows behind her. Valora paused at the threshold of my office like she owned the air in it. "Good morning," she said, her tone silky, rehearsed. "We should talk, sister to sister." My eyes didn't leave her face. I didn't return the greeting. She walked in anyway, glancing at the pottery on the shelf like it amused her. One of the mugs, a hand-thrown piece from a student I'd mentored, tilted slightly under her fingers. She straightened it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've always had such quaint taste," she murmured. I stayed still. She circled the room slowly, like she needed to burn energy, or maybe delay what she already knew was coming. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said at last, her back turned to me, "but I needed something for myself for once, something that wasn't just leftovers after you got all the light." I let the silence stretch between us, unbroken, until even the rain outside felt quieter. She turned, her eyes glassy. "You always had the praise, Talia, the attention, the quiet genius. Mom and Dad never saw me the way they saw you." Still, I didn't speak. "You think I planned everything, that I'm some mastermind." She gave a half laugh, brittle. "I just wanted one thing to be mine." I opened the drawer beside me. Not rushed, not dramatic, just precise. From inside, I pulled out a thick manila folder and placed it squarely in front of me. Then I slid it toward her across the oak desk. "You'll want to see this." She didn't touch it right away. Her gaze flicked from the folder to me, then back again, like the weight of it had suddenly shifted the floor beneath her. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low. "Everything," I said. "Inside, a formal legal complaint. Filed yesterday. Charges, fraudulent misrepresentation, attempted poisoning, conspiracy to harm a legal officer of the court. Also inside, an affidavit from the server at the anniversary dinner, and the audio recording, the one that didn't just capture the wine switch, but her whisper to Declan, her mistake." Valora's fingers trembled as she reached for the paper, and then she saw the signature at the bottom of the affidavit. Her face drained. "Oscar Morales," she breathed. "That's the waiter?" I nodded once. He was just a server," she stammered. "He didn't even—" "I sponsored his visa 3 years ago," I said quietly. "Mentored him through every form, every interview. He stayed in touch. Told me he needed a second job. I told him to take the weekend gig at the anniversary." Valora sank into the chair across from me like the wind had gone out of her. "You recorded me," she whispered. "No," I replied. "He did. And then he came straight to me." She blinked rapidly. You're suing me? For trying to hurt you?" "No," I said. "You're being sued for attempting to poison a legal officer of the court, which I am." Her laugh came suddenly, sharp and off balance. "You can't be serious. Talia, this'll ruin our family's name. Do you understand what you're doing?" I stood. "No," I said, "it won't ruin the family's name. It'll define who we are. Finally, without the lies." She stood too, but with a jerk. Her composure cracked for a second, just long enough for me to see it. She gripped the back of the chair like it might steady her. "You'd really go through with this?" she asked. I tilted my head. "I already did." She didn't say goodbye. She didn't apologize. She turned, heels echoing down the marble hallway, past the framed photo of our father on the wall. She didn't glance at it. But I did. He was smiling in the picture. Hand on my shoulder, Valora standing off to the side. He used to say we were both strong, just in different ways. Now I wasn't so sure. They arrived 15 minutes after sundown. I'd been waiting by the kitchen window, watching the headlights sweep across the concrete outside my building like searchlights. When the elevator chimed, I didn't flinch. I set down my glass, checked the lock one last time, and turned the lights down low. Mood mattered tonight. I heard Valora's laugh first, fake, stretched too tight, and then Emmerich voice, smoother, practiced, like he was entering a meeting he thought he already controlled. They didn't knock. They just walked in. Valora stepped over the threshold first, her white coat still damp from the drizzle. Emmerich followed, hands in pockets, his mouth already curled into a smile that didn't bother reaching his eyes. "I figured you'd be dramatic," he said, unbuttoning his coat. "But this? Dragging the whole family into court?" He gave a soft chuckle, then glanced at Valora. "She's built her whole image on forgiveness, remember?" I didn't respond. Just turned and slowly reached behind me. Click. The lock slid into place with a sound that cut through the jazz humming low from the kitchen speaker. Valora blinked. "What are you doing?" "Making sure no one interrupts," I said. My voice was quiet, but it landed like a cold coin dropped into water. Emmerich tilted his head. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't blow this up. You hate mess." "You'd burn the whole family down. For what?" Valora hissed. "To prove a point?" Finally, I raised my voice. Just once. "I'm not proving a point. I'm stopping a pattern." That silenced them. I walked past the marble island toward the bookshelf near the hallway and pulled out a folder. Then another. I carried them to the table and laid them flat side by side. Paperwork, financial statements, petitions, receipts, quiet, damning things. Valora crossed her arms. Emmerich rolled his eyes. "You filed something," he said. "Big deal." I looked at him. "I filed a motion to freeze all joint marital assets pending investigation, including your firm, Emmerich, the one you started with a loan from my inheritance. Remember?" He stared at me. The smirk died on his lips. "You've gone off the rails," he said slowly. "You're a bitter woman using the law to play God." He grabbed the nearest wine glass and hurled it against the far wall. It shattered just below the canvas I'd painted during my first year of grief counseling. The wine smeared like blood down the drywall. "Get a grip," he spat. "Do you even know what you're doing?" "I do." I opened my laptop. The screen lit up his face, his jaw tightening, eyes narrowing as the footage began to play. Audio, video, crisp and clear. It showed the night before our anniversary party, Valora and Emmerich in the catering kitchen of the venue, practicing. She poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed her a napkin. They rehearsed the handoff. "You bugged me?" he asked, voice ragged, stunned. "No," I said, not looking away from the screen. "I bugged myself, because I had a feeling the people I loved might be planning something I wouldn't survive." The room went silent except for the faint clinking of the jazz from the kitchen. Emmerich took 1 step back, then another. His breath came faster now, shallow and uneven. "You—" he started, but nothing followed. I waited. He stormed toward the door, ripped it open and slammed it behind him so hard that the frame rattled. The silence afterward was massive. Valora stayed seated. Her shoulders had dropped. Her hands were trembling now, barely. But I saw it. She looked up at me, her voice so quiet it was almost not there. "You think this is over?" I didn't answer her. Because I didn't think it was over. I knew it was just starting. The city was still sleeping when I left my condo. Fog clung to the sidewalks like breath on cold glass. I didn't bother with coffee. I didn't sleep either. My mind hadn't stopped moving since Emmerich's exit or Valora's last whisper. And now, I had to finish what they started. By 7:15 a.m., I was at my attorney's office downtown. I handed over the footage. No small talk, no smiles, just the USB drive and my instructions. He watched it once, grimaced, and nodded. "We'll request an emergency ethics review and evidence hearing, but there's one more thing I'd suggest, Talia." I raised an eyebrow. "A toxicology panel, just in case." I hesitated. "I didn't drink it." "True," he said, "but she did." That was enough. By 9 a.m., I was at the hospital, answering a nurse's questions with as few words as possible. I handed over both wine glasses, the untouched one I'd switched and the one Valora drank from. I'd saved them both, sealed and stored with chain of custody documentation. Paranoia? Maybe. Survival? Absolutely. 3 hours later, the results came back. Sedatives. But not just anything you'd find in a common medicine cabinet, a compound usually used for large animals, powerful enough to slow a heart down until it just stopped. The dosage wasn't lethal, but it would have mimicked a panic attack, a sudden fainting spell, even cardiac arrest in someone with the wrong history. I didn't say a word to the nurse. I just folded the paper and slid it into the folder labeled Confirmation. It wasn't about being sick. It was about being gone, erased. And suddenly, everything snapped into place. Valora knew I was the primary trustee for our mother's healthcare fund. She also knew I'd recently asked for a third-party audit, one she'd been stalling. There were rumors of double-billed expenses, accounts our mother had no knowledge of. But if I had vanished, if something had happened before the audit, Valora would have been free to keep siphoning funds with no one to stop her. She didn't just want me quiet, she wanted me out of the picture. By noon, we were seated in a stark boardroom, high ceiling, frosted glass, the seal of the state bar embedded into the carpet. A hearing for Emmerich had been expedited. My lawyer and I sat on one side of the long table. Across from us, Emmerich, his expression unreadable, and two gray-suited attorneys. Valora entered 5 minutes late, of course, dressed in white again, her posture too perfect. She wasn't summoned, but she walked in like she owned the floor. "I'd like to speak," she said smoothly, "on behalf of my brother-in-law." I didn't flinch. She spoke with polish, claimed the footage had been altered, that I had a grudge, had always resented their closeness, and was using the legal system to air personal vendettas. And, she added, "if you check the metadata, you'll find inconsistencies. Talia is skilled with digital manipulation." Her voice was sweet enough to rot wood. The board began to murmur, and then, just as planned, he entered. Jacob Navarro, a former paralegal at Emmerich's firm. Younger than most in the room, tie slightly askew. He cleared his throat and placed a hard drive on the table. "I'm here voluntarily," he said. "I worked on security requests for a restaurant near the anniversary venue. I pulled backup footage from their internal system. It's untouched, and it matches hers." He looked at me. "She helped me with my citizenship case 4 years ago. She didn't ask for anything in return, so today, I'm not asking either." The room went quiet. The footage played. Angle 1, Angle 2, timestamps synced to the second. Valora's hand hesitated in the same spot. Emmerich's nod. The glass swap. All of it. My video hadn't been doctored. It had been duplicated. One board member leaned forward, tapping a pen against the table. "This is more than professional misconduct," he said. "This borders on criminal conspiracy." Emmerich's face drained of color. Valora stared blankly, her smile dissolving like sugar in hot tea. The board voted. Unanimous. Emmerich's license was suspended pending further investigation. They'd open a full ethics review into prior cases, including financial entanglements with Valora's LLCs. We stood. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look back. Outside, under the steel-gray sky, Valora finally spoke. "You ruined everything." I turned to face her. "No," I said calmly. "You did. I just showed it." She clenched her fists, lips trembling. For the first time in years, she looked like the younger sister. Small, cornered, furious. And I walked away. But I didn't know they'd planned one more move, one last trap, and I was walking straight into it. The invite came the same afternoon Emmerich's suspension hit the press. It was sent to my old email, the one I hadn't used since I'd been quietly scrubbed from the Foundation's site. Subject line, courtesy reminder, annual gala seating confirmation. The message was short, no greeting, just the time, the venue, and a dress code. Formal elegance expected. They didn't expect me to come. They assumed I'd stay home, licking wounds. They didn't know I'd already sewn mine shut. By early evening, I was driving north on I-5 towards Seattle, my phone off, my speech rehearsed in silence. The rain tapped lightly against the windshield like it had something to say. I arrived early, on purpose, and waited in the car across the street from the venue for 20 minutes, just watching. It was all perfectly orchestrated: crystal chandeliers, a carpet the color of bruised orchids, velvet ropes and perfectly postured greeters in tuxedos, but it was all too much, too precise, the kind of glitter that hides dust. Inside, I was greeted with a smile that didn't reach the eyes. "We don't have a name badge for Talia, was it?" I said nothing. They sat me at the back, again, near the exit, next to the kitchen doors, where the scent of overcooked salmon leaked through every time a server passed. I let them think it would rattle me. It didn't. Valora was already on stage when I took my seat. White again, of course, like purity could be sewn into a hemline. She smiled like a politician, dead eyes and a 1,000-watt grin, as she praised the legacy our family built generation by generation. Her voice was syrupy, slow, perfectly modulated. She looked comfortable up there, untouchable. But legacies aren't built in galas. They're built in silence, in early mornings, in midnight sacrifice, in years of unpaid work and unpaid thanks. And I had receipts. Halfway through the night, the silent auction began. I could hear murmurs about art donations, vacation packages, rare wines, and then the next item popped up on the screen: Foundational Archive, original documents, grants, early donor files. My throat tightened. It was the binder I'd compiled 10 years ago, before Valora joined, before the board was manipulated, before the website was edited to erase my role. My handwriting was on those pages, my name, printed, initialed, signed. They hadn't noticed what they were auctioning. I stood, walked forward, no microphone, no spotlight. Just me and a room full of eyes that weren't used to looking at me unless I was holding a tray or a pen. I spoke anyway. "You've all funded something tonight, something that claims to carry on a family's legacy. Just make sure the story you've supported isn't built on a lie." I picked up the binder, held it high enough for them to see the yellowing tabs, the hand-labeled categories. "This," I said, "was the beginning, not what's been rewritten, not the version you see on websites or in glossy brochures. This." A pause. "I've filed articles of incorporation for a new nonprofit, one that protects caregivers and whistleblowers. It's fully funded, and 2 of this foundation's top donors have already committed to matching grants. Some of you in this room know who you are." Gasps. Silence. And then, an explosion of sound. Chairs scraping, whispers spreading like wildfire. I saw Emmerich stand in the crowd, flushed and shouting, "You're manipulating everyone with this sad little revenge story." But it wasn't Emmerich's voice that cut through. It was the shattering of crystal. Valora had hurled a champagne flute. It missed by 3 feet, striking a marble column with a sharp, perfect crack. Security moved fast. Not on me, on her. They didn't need orders. As they approached, Valora hissed, "This isn't over." I looked at her one last time. "No," I replied, "but your control is." And I left. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't need vindication from a room that once pretended I didn't exist. Outside, cameras clicked. I was ready this time. A reporter shoved a mic near my face. "Talia, did you know your sister and husband would try to destroy your legacy?" I smiled, not wide, not for show, just enough. "They didn't understand who I was," I said. "Now they do." Then I walked away. And the next morning, The headline read, "Wife outsmarts sister-husband duo in stunning silent power move." I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't proud, but because it didn't feel like a victory. Not really. Not in the way Valora or Emmerich might have seen it. This wasn't a show. It wasn't revenge. It was a reckoning. And now that the dust had started to settle, the silence that followed was heavier than the storm that came before. Over the following days, reporters camped out for statements. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years sent vague texts, half curious, half supportive. Some people called me brave, others cold. One talk show even ran a segment titled, "How Far is Too Far for Justice in the Family?" They didn't use my name, but I was the "how far." I stopped watching after that. Instead, I filled my days with long walks again, paths I used to take with Dad before his joints gave out, before the whispers of dementia crept in, before Valora convinced him to sign the power of attorney papers. 2 weeks passed before I got the voicemail. It came from a second cousin I hadn't heard from in over a decade. He'd found it while cleaning out an old phone, backed up on a cloud account tied to my father's email. "Talia," the voice said, tired but familiar, warm. "You're the reason any of this was ever real. If I'm not around to say it, know that I saw you." I stopped walking, just stood there in the middle of the park trail with bare branches overhead and birds singing like nothing had changed. It was his voice, the same one that used to read me bedtime stories with too much drama and not enough pacing, the one that taught me how to measure wood by eye and how to fix a garbage disposal with nothing but pliers and attitude. The message was short, but it was enough. All this time, I'd been moving forward without ever really knowing if he'd seen me. Me, not the image Valora shaped or the silence Emmerich demanded. Just me. I walked the rest of the loop slower that morning. The air felt clearer somehow, less like something pressing against my chest, more like something waiting to be exhaled. Later that day, I stopped by the women's shelter I'd quietly funded back when Valora still claimed credit for it. I hadn't been back since the plaque with her name was removed. A young woman was sitting by the vending machines when I walked in, early 20s maybe. Her left eye was bruised and fading, her arms crossed too tightly. She glanced at me like I might ask too many questions. "I'm fine," she mumbled before I could even speak. I nodded, sat down on the bench opposite her, gave it a few beats of silence. "They said I should have kept quiet," she added, barely above a whisper. But I couldn't. I looked at her, really looked. "You did the right thing," I said. "Good. Never again." She blinked at me like no one had ever told her that before. Sometimes I think about the irony. All those years, I was the quiet one, the steady one, the one who folded napkins and returned calls and didn't raise my voice when I should have. But silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's just the space between who you are and who you're becoming. That night, I returned to my new place. Smaller than the house I'd left. Cozier. Mine. The framed napkin was the first thing I saw when I stepped through the door. I'd taken it from that anniversary dinner, the one where this all began. On it, written in smudged black ink, were 2 simple words I had scribbled as Valora toasted the future, and Declan smiled just a little too wide. I know. I hung it above the mantel, not because I needed to remember the pain, but because I needed to remember that even then, when they thought I was blind, I had already begun to see. It didn't erase what happened. It didn't undo the lies. But it reclaimed something no one else could name for me. My voice. My truth. My name. And for the first time in a long while, the sound of it felt like peace. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who should have stood by you? How did you heal? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.